Welcome back. This is the Help Not Harm Summit. I'm Nicole Hudgens. I manage government affairs here at Family Policy Alliance, and it's an honor to be with you to introduce our congressional panel. We have members of Congress with us today who will be sharing their hearts on this important topic. So without further ado, let's get started. First, we have Senator Mike Lee from the great state of Utah. Senator Lee has spent his career defending the fundamental liberties of all Americans and advocating for America's founding constitutional principles. He is a true champion for the Constitution, rule of law, religious liberty, and family values. He serves as the ranking Republican on the Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust, Competition Policy, and Consumer Rights. Senator Lee and his wife Sharon live in Utah County and have three children, John, James, and Eliza. Senator Lee, it's an honor to have you with us, and the virtual floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Senator Mike Lee. The Constitution limits the federal government to just a few basic listed powers and responsibilities. Whenever the federal government steps out of those boundaries, it does so to the detriment of the freedom and the prosperity of the American people. In short, people get hurt. Similarly, medicine and the medical sciences more broadly adhere to a foundational creed. It's called the Hippocratic Oath. The primary principle of this oath, succinctly put, is first, do no harm. When this commitment is ignored, medicine, and in particular medical research, can destroy and mutilate rather than heal. The interaction between government and medical science, when it's operating out of bounds, is simply disastrous, and countless examples exist. Citizens like us have to be engaged to ensure that the resources and the influence of government are never used to further harmful or immoral ends. In 2015, the National Institutes of Health began giving millions of dollars to taxpayer-funded grants to pediatric clinics with the express purpose of conducting research on, quote, the impact of early medical treatment in transgender youth, close quote. That troubling description actually means observing hormonal intervention in children as young as 8 years old. Now, I've demanded that the NIH cease this unethical study and get rid of any grant programs where they're providing money for transgender research on children using U.S. taxpayer dollars. I was horrified to see the Biden administration has renewed and extended this particular study. Now, let's be clear what's happening here. A girl as young as 8 could receive taxpayer-funded high-dose testosterone solely on the basis of a perceived discomfort with her gender. In other cases, children and adolescents were given puberty-blocking drugs and cross-sex hormones. These treatments can have permanent and irreversible effects on children, all with the knowledge and support of the federal government. Now, tragically, research also conducted by the federal government has shown that all too often these treatments fail to achieve their intended effect of improving mental health, and they often make things worse. Children who feel discomfort with their biological sex should be treated with kindness, respect, and compassion. This research, which can impose irreversible harms on children, is none of the above. We must have our government stay within constitutional boundaries and encourage federal medical researchers to stay within their moral bounds, to do no harm. That's exactly why I've introduced the Protecting Our Kids from Harmful Research Act. My bill would prohibit any taxpayer funds from being used to fund research or publications affirming a minor's identity that's incongruent with that person's biological sex. My bill would make sure federal studies like this one never happen. We must ensure that federal research helps rather than harms American children.
Thank you, Senator Lee, for your hard work on this important issue. Next, we have Congresswoman Vicki Hartzler. Congresswoman Hartzler proudly represents the good people of Missouri's 4th Congressional District. She is a wife, mother, lifelong farmer, small business owner, and a former public school teacher with a passion for life and for serving God and others.
She is the chairwoman of the House Values Action Team and serves the House Armed Services and Agriculture Committees. She's been a true champion for faith, family, and freedom on Capitol Hill. Congresswoman, thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Nicole. It's so good to be with you, and this is such an important topic. I was a teacher before I ran for office, and I was a track coach for many years. And I love working with teenagers, both boys and girls, and it has just really been heartbreaking to see the challenges that they are facing now with the redefinition of sex. And I'm particularly concerned as a former track coach with a threat to girls' sports as a result of this. I think that it's wrong for biological males to be competing in girls' sports. We have examples of girls who have been denied ribbons and medals at track meets because they had to compete against a biological male, and they were denied scholarship opportunities as a result. And for years, girls struggled in sports to have equality and to have the right to be able to have their own teams and to excel and to win and to have those wonderful experiences. And Title IX came along and give them that right. And now it's sad that people who consider themselves feminists are now promoting this agenda of allowing these biological males to compete in girls' sports. And so I'm proud to have co-sponsored Representative Greg Steube's legislation that says if you receive federal dollars, you cannot do that girls' sports have to remain biological girls. And I'm hoping that we can get that passed because it just makes sense. I also wrote an op-ed to President Biden drawing attention to the problems with his executive order, where he has said across the board in all areas of federal government, you need to consider and change the definition of sex to include gender identity and sexual orientation. And this has huge ramifications for many federal programs and could impact girls' education and higher education for girls and girls' scholarships and all of those programs that have been established over the years to help females be able to have equal access to not only sports, but education opportunities as well. And so I'm going to keep speaking out against that. I'm also very concerned with the push to encourage young people to have major surgeries to change their biological bodies to look like the opposite sex. It doesn't change them from being a girl and a boy, but it would change them from being able to have children, to do these very dramatic sex change operations. And in my mind, that is almost equivalent to child abuse for adults and these types of surgeries and medical puberty blockers. And we have to speak out against that. We know over 80% through puberty and struggling and maybe they have some confusion about their identity or their gender is settled in their biological sex after they go through puberty and their later teenage spoken with individuals who had these changing operations and they regretted it. But it's very difficult to do that, and many of them have been unable to have children as a result. They have a future surgery, which is painful and expensive. So we've got to do everything we can to oppose that. Another thing that's going on in Congress that I'm involved in is to try to speak out against a bill that they are calling the Equality Act, and they passed in the House, and it's now over in the Senate. And I really call it the Inequality Act, but it would change the Civil Rights Act and the definition of what is discrimination to include not just discrimination based on your race or your religion or your sex, but it changes it to mean that sex orientation and sexual and has parental rights. It has ramifications for, once again, girls' sports. It makes the ramifications for education and whether bathroom use and whether biological boys who identify as a female, if it's discriminatory, if a school doesn't allow them to use the bathroom. It impacts adoption and foster care. It impacts medical professionals, and that's why I led an effort on the House floor and to oppose this. Here's some of the examples that we have seen as a result of states that have adopted these policies. We've seen parental rights be taken away in Ohio from a couple who had a daughter who wanted to go through a sex change operation. The parents objected, and an agency took them to court, and a judge took away their parental rights, gave the daughter to the grandmother who supported the surgery, and so that she could go ahead and have that. I mean, this is ridiculous. Parents know best what's best for their kids, and it's just wrong to have this threat, if on a federal level, if this passes, for parents all over the country. But medical professionals are very concerned as well, who don't want to participate or be forced to participate in one of these surgeries. But if this bill gets passed and it's discriminatory to not give them equal medical treatment, we could see individuals being forced to have to participate and to perform these surgeries. Say the adoption agencies would be forced to place children in the homes of not a man, and not a mother and father, which would go contrary to many of their religious beliefs. So we need to continue to reach out to our senators and tell them, do not pass the so-called Equality Act. It would have devastating impact for our nation. And we just need to remember what is truth in this country. And it is based on the Word of God, which says that God made them male and female. He made them. And there is equality between them, not sameness. Men and women aren't the same. They each have their own strengths and weaknesses and potential in life, but they are equal in God's sight. They have equal worth, equal value, equal opportunities to succeed in America, to live the American dream out. That is the message we need to speak out loud and clear in a world that is confused, and they need to hear that truth. And certainly to young people who are going through so much, to come alongside them, support them through those tough years, and make sure that they can live out their God-given potential as well. So thank you for holding this seminar and for giving me the opportunity to share an update on some of the things that I've been working on in DC on this very important topic. We want to make sure that we help, not harm, future generations. So thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Hartzler, for all you have done to protect American families. Next, we have Congressman Doug LaMalfa, who represents California's 1st Congressional District. Congressman LaMalfa has introduced 2 pieces of legislation to protect children and conscience rights related to the Help Not Harm issue. They are the Protecting Children from Experimentation Act, H.R. 1926, and the End Taxpayer Funding of Gender Experimentation Act, H.R. 1927. These key pieces of legislation would protect children and the conscience rights of taxpayers from radical ideologies. Congressman LaMalfa's firm beliefs are that the government should do no harm, and that the limited government means that government should do only what people cannot do for themselves in the most efficient manner possible. Thank you for joining us, Congressman. The virtual floor is yours.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the effort that family policy does, and because really at the end of the day, the reason I think we're motivated as, or should be motivated as Americans, as parents, is for protecting the next generation and having them have the ability to thrive and have what's true and what's right, and be surround them with that until they're adults and they can make their own decisions. And so when we're talking about this situation with gender fluidity and the agenda that's being pushed out there so hard in society these days, trying to confuse kids and getting parents where they don't know if they're right or wrong anymore either on how they feel about things, or gaslighted or kowtowed into thinking that there's something wrong with their values, or with their the basic decency that they were raised with. And so our morals are constantly under attack, and we're seeing that's just taken a warp 9 drive factor here now under this new administration. They have been emboldened to act in a way that is not in the interest of our kids, not in interest of American families, and they got the wind in their sails right now. So when I saw this situation crop up, oh, it's been about a year and a half or so now, with the one that really got me was, I think it was a mother in Texas, because her son, as I recall, had made even some kind of foray, some kind of look at, like, girls' toys, girls' clothes, or something. Like, boom, they run out and want to change his gender, and that looks like a political agenda. And I don't know why people would experiment with their own kids on that. So we saw this going on. We see more and more push on my home state of California here. It's really underway, and so legislation preventing people from getting counseling for their kids if they become gender confused, or their sexual orientation has confusion. They're preventing that. They're preventing from even being able to ask questions about it, or you have criminal charges against you. Parental rights are under assault. We see it all across the country with discussions with school boards on what is the content in schools. Horrendous content for especially young kids on so-called sex education that has very explicit things in there, and other things like critical race theory. So we have our government moving against people just trying to express their opinions on what their values are for their kids in schools. Kids don't belong to the schools. Kids don't belong to the government. You can extend that to this vaccine business too, with kids under pick an age, 16, 12, what have you. This forced vaccine situation that we're seeing here in California, and Biden's trying to push across the country. People are being pushed back, pushed into a corner on this. And so I'm glad your organization is there helping to lead the way on this cause here, where we have people, even doctors, schools, what have you, trying to push this gender change ideology. I saw this rise up, and that's why, as you mentioned, I put forward 2 different pieces of legislation to limit. One, probably the lighter duty version is just to not be able to use tax dollars, use the public dollars to basically perform, whether it's gender reassignment, as they call it. I don't even like using these terms. It's not assignment. God assigns your gender at birth, and that's it, And so we ought not be using everybody's tax dollars to advance this, whether it's puberty blocking hormones or eventually surgery. But it all starts with the puberty blocking hormones. And what's this do to the kids' physiology? It's going to take their reproductive systems at a time when maybe they're gender confused. We have statistics out there that shows that most kids that are of young age that might have gender confusion, which I think is driven a lot by media and by an agenda as well, they wouldn't be gender confused if they didn't have it in their face all day long, every day in media and schools, and even teachers saying, "Oh, it's all great," So at the first level, we could at least not use tax dollars on that. But my second bill takes it even farther, is that we would penalize doctors and other healthcare individuals that are would do this just in general. Okay, because I feel that strongly. To be impressed by an agenda out there with all Pride Month and everything else that goes on, to use that as a wedge to get kids to say, well, hey, let's go ahead and take you down this path here. That's just evil, as what it is. So the stats show that the vast majority of kids that have an issue with what their sexuality might be, they come out of it and stay with the gender as the sex as given to them by God at birth. Okay, numbers at least 80%. So if we didn't have this agenda out there pushing on that, I think it would be lower, because it almost seems like it's popular or a fad for kids to say, hey, I'm going to play the field here. I could go either way. When you have how many different genders as identified by some of these organizations here, 32 or more. I mean, how do you even come up with that? You could perhaps come up with 4 or 5 if you're creative, but and that basically would be more physical issues than anything else. But I think we as parents and Family Policy Alliance, we got to hang together on this, because the assault on across the board on all the things I've mentioned in this short conversation here is coming at us. And so when we have this Biden administration getting the FBI to want to start investigating, Attorney General Merrick Garland, glad he didn't get on the Supreme Court. using the tools of the FBI to intimidate parents into not speaking up at their school board meetings and such, because, oh, it might be violent. Yet, what do they get away with? All the protests and things that go on across the country that end up in violence and burned buildings. You know, we're in a bad way right now, and we have to hang firm and tough and not take no for an answer. You know, one of a motto we use around my office is never take no from a bureaucrat. A bureaucrat, they 9 to 5 it. They don't care at the end of the day. They just want to keep a job, get a advancement, and get their pension lined up. That's a lot of what you see. Sorry, that's a broad brush, but you know, you see it when you got people that you're trying to get help from, and they don't care if you get help or not. So bureaucracy doesn't care about your kids, and the other hierarchies that they're subject to don't really seem to care about kids or your rights or your values. You have to be strong. You have to stand up. You go to those school board meetings, and you be vocal, and let the FBI come try and arrest you. You know, if they're as long as you're being peaceful, if you're not threatening violence, but you can be strong-willed, you can be strong-voiced, but do not let them kowtow you into not being part of this, because if we just cede that field to them, then, you know, they win, and our values go down the drain, and the next generations go down the drain with all this confusion and unhappiness. So I think my legislation, it's not really going to go too far under Pelosi. We know that. But we make a statement, we put it out there, we have it for discussion like you folks are seeing here. And that's you folks also see that there are people in Washington, D.C. fighting back, like my great friend who I admire a lot, Vicki Hartzler, who is also in this video series as well, and others. There are good fighters there. And so we're inspired by you, and I hope we can do our part to inspire you to keep fighting. So thank you for the time.
Well, thank you, Congressman LaMalfa, for your leadership on this important issue. And just as you said, it can be discouraging when we see what's happening in Washington, D.C., but being able to
And my
take
home
the
state of
time.
California, too. California is messed up. But
Yes, sir. But
so I don't know which place my plane lands. It isn't really a good alternative sometimes. But as you see, I'm standing here on my farm in the very rural part of far northern California, away from the big cities where all this comes from. We're just trying to survive with, you know, keeping water for our crops and being able to farm our crops and, you know, have our families. You know, I got 4 kids and they love it on this farm. I don't think they want to do the alternative. So this is what we're all fighting for here.
Yes, sir. Well, you and Representative Hartzler and so many on Capitol Hill are courageously standing for children and families, even in the midst of what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. So thank you for your courageous stand. And folks, we encourage you to let us know what you think by posting in the comments below. We're so thankful that there are men and women who are standing up in Washington, D.C. and across the country on this issue. And I'm excited about our next panel because while we've seen what's happening in DC, you may be asking, what can I do? What can I do in the state where I live? Well, this next panel is going to give you the answer to those questions. You'll hear from incredible state leaders about how you can stay engaged on this issue right where you live. So stay tuned, and we'll be back in a few minutes.